In 1564, on the day that Michelangelo died, Galileo Galilei was born in Pisa. And around age 17, he was put into the University of Pisa by his parents to study medicine. And one day when he was at a service at the cathedral, he was distracted by a big bronze lamp suspended from the ceiling. And somebody had pulled it aside to light it, and when they let it go, it swung slower and slower until it stopped. As he was swinging, Galileo used his pulse to keep a steady beat, and he noticed that the time it took to swing didn't change along with the length of the swing. It was independent from it, and, this really blew his mind. So he did some tests in his spare time, and also found that the weight of a pendulum's bob didn't affect the time of the swing, only the length of the pendulum did. And that was what really kind of piqued his interest in math and science. And one day, he got the chance to attend a lecture on geometry at the university. And after that, he was just like, oh my holy crap, what have I been missing? So after getting his parents' permission, he basically just ditched medicine and studied math and science instead. So about 8 years later, when he was about 25, he became the professor of math at the University of Pisa. And around that time is when he started experimenting with gravity and momentum. So that's when he did his famous experiment at the Tower of Pisa. Hundreds of people were there watching it, students, religious figures, and professors all alike. He dropped 2 pieces of metal off, one much bigger and heavier than the other. And the thing was that they both landed at the same time, which totally contradicted Aristotle's theory, which was that heavier things fall faster. And from this experiment, Galileo created the famous formula S equals gt squared divided by 2. But even though they had seen the experiment with their own eyes, the other professors didn't really like the idea of Galileo messing with the theory of Aristotle on which they had based all of their teachings on for so many years. And they really just picked on him so much that one day Galileo just resigned and left. And about a year later, he was accepted as a professor of math at the University of Padua, who were more open to scientific advances. And for 13 years, he continued his experiments. And it was about 1609 by the time Galileo had heard of the newest invention, the spyglass. Taking these ideas and improving on them in his own way, he whipped up his own little model and called it the telescope, which happened to work much, much better. Now, he called it the telescope after the Greek words tele and skopos, meaning far and watching. He went on to make 4 more upgraded versions. With this telescope, he found Jupiter's 4 moons, which supported the Copernican theory, where smaller bodies orbit around the larger bodies, rather than large bodies orbiting around a small center point. He also observed sunspots, mountains on the moon, the phases of Venus, and Saturn's rings. But these discoveries just made the churchmen angry. They still basically worshipped Aristotle's theory. Aristotle had said that the sun was perfect and without blemish. He also said that the Earth, and hence man, was at the center of the universe and everything orbited around it. One even went so far to say that Galileo put little tiny moons in his telescope. In 1633, Galileo published a book supporting the Copernican theory. About a year later, he was summoned to appear before the Inquisition. There, an ill and old man was forced under the threat of torture to recant his scientific findings. His book was thrown in the prohibited works and stayed there for over 200 years. The old scholar's life was broken. Still a prisoner in his own home, he was permitted to continue his scientific research, but became blind and died in January 1642. So what did Galileo teach us? He introduced the blend of experiment and theory. He discovered the science of dynamics with free-flowing objects. He formed the laws involving momentum, and he invented the first modern-type microscope and sector compass. Galileo died in 1642 at the age of 78. The year Galileo died was the year that Isaac Newton was born. The end.